Welcome to the deep dive. You know, when we think about history, we tend to think about the big stuff, right? The grand treaties, the royal decrees, all those dusty legal texts.
Exactly. The official record.
But today, we're not interested in that at all. We are leaning in close to the whisper of the past. We're seeking out these moments of just raw, preserved humanity.
We are opening a parcel of yellowed paper that, records a woman wanting new stockings or a farmer who jokes about his long-dead ancestors as if they just stepped out of the room.
That's it, exactly. Our mission today is a deep dive into the research notes of an acclaimed antiquarian, a woman named Miss Rosamond Merridew. And these notes, they detail her hunt for the most human historical fragments she could find in Norfolk.
And through her search, we get to explore two timelines at the same time. There's the methodical, almost modern pursuit of history, and then there's the intense, confined, but just deeply emotional life of a young woman she found in those records.
Mistress Joan Martyn, living in her family's hall way back in 1480.
That's the one.
And what's so incredible is that we have access to Merridew's private notes. So they don't just detail the facts of the past, but the sheer emotional charge and the intellectual breakthroughs she had while she was finding them.
It's like a shortcut for us, a way to understand what history truly feels like when you hold it in your hands.
And it all begins, as it always does, with the person doing the looking.
Miss Rosamond Merridew, she is no amateur.
Not at all. She's a figure of international fame, specializing in this really dense, often impenetrable history of medieval English land tenure. We're talking 13th through 15th centuries.
And she's 45 years old, and she's quite open about the profound sacrifice she made for her profession.
She is incredibly self-aware about that choice, isn't she? She actually acknowledges trading the conventional life, the husband, the family, the comfortable house, for what she calls fragments of yellow parchment.
She consciously chose that dusty, difficult path of research, and that personal investment, it really defines her entire philosophy of history.
It really does. I love how she refers to her documents. She calls them her shriveled and colorless little gnomes.
It's such a strange description.
It is. But you realize instantly that she treats these gnomes with this fierce, almost maternal passion. It's like they're her ugly, brilliant offspring. They only speak to a select few, but for her, they contain a genius and a life that everyone else just overlooks.
And that emotional connection, it drives her entire methodology. She has this perspective of like a traveling peddler. She's always buying, never selling, and she shows up at these ancient halls and remote farmhouses with the same insistent demand.
Do you have any old papers to show me?
Exactly. She knows the golden age for the sport is over, and she kind of laments how everything has become so commercialized or claimed by state commissions. It makes her private appeals much less successful.
Still, she maintained that her pursuit, despite all the difficulties, yielded very fine prizes. And the prizes that satisfied her the most were almost always the most minute details.
Which leads directly to her central, profound insight, the aha moment that changed how she saw the entirety of medieval existence.
A stalking revelation.
Right. It's almost comical how mundane the trigger was, but the conclusion was completely revolutionary. She describes finding this single, sudden light shed upon the life of a woman named Dame Elizabeth Partridge, a light so bright it suddenly illuminated the whole state of England to the king upon his throne.
And that light was the simple fact that Dame Elizabeth needed stockings.
That's it.
Okay, but hold on. On the surface, needing new hosiery sounds incredibly trivial. Why did this one mundane detail fundamentally change her whole view of history? Why is that so much more important than, say, the legal land deeds she was supposed to be studying?
Because it's undeniable physical reality. Merridew realized that needing stockings proves the absolute indisputable reality of medieval legs, and by extension, medieval bodies. And if the body is real, and it's functional, and it's subject to mundane needs like cold feet or worn-out clothes, then the brain inside that body must also have been real, functional, and fully human.
Ah, I see. So that small fact, a simple domestic necessity, it bypasses all the impenetrable abstract legal jargon and connects her instantly to the absolute core humanity of the past. It removes that romantic filter we all tend to use.
It's a profound intellectual rejection of the idea that history is only about what's grand and complex. Merridew explicitly says that the intricacies of the land tenure were not always the most important facts in people's lives.
She even suggests that the complexities we modern academics delight in might actually have been a sign of their ancestors' negligence, not their diligence.
It's an incredible thought, isn't it? Why would a sane man spend time needlessly complicating laws just for the benefit of a half a dozen historians 5 centuries later? It's such a powerful challenge to the academic standard.
It is. And this realization is what informs her unique approach, the part that earns her the most criticism from her peers. Her most famous work, The Manor Rolls, is known for its digressions.
She refuses to make her inquiries purely about dry law and finances. She makes them subsidiary to certain pictures of the family life, and she calls these pictures the flower of all these intricate roots.
These are the moments her critics scoffed at, these little vignettes that make her work so beloved, like the picture of knocking at a serf's door to find him roasting a poached rabbit.
Or seeing the lord of the manor just setting out for a walk. She includes these intimate scenes, like Dame Eleanor sharply reproving her daughter for slow stitching, worried that, "Child, thy husband will be here before thy house linen is ready."
But this is where we have to introduce some friction, because her critics had a point, didn't they? They said these domestic scenes had nothing to do with land tenure.
And worse, they accused her of lacking the material evidence to back them up, especially since the 15th century is famously bare of private records compared to, say, the Elizabethan era. They accuse her of relying on imagination, of blurring the line between history and storytelling.
Which seems like a valid academic concern. If you can't prove the details, you're just writing historical fiction.
But her defense is so compelling. She argues that imagination isn't the enemy of history. It's the bridge we have to use when private records, the documents that reveal daily human life, are scarce. She's actively hunting for proof of those moments.
She's seeking a chance to move beyond just supposition and to hold a genuine, preserved human moment in her hands.
And it was that continuous, unyielding hunt for the human kernel that drove her, a couple of years before she wrote these notes, along a specific road in Norfolk.
Right, she was driving along the Thetford Road from Norwich toward East Harling. And she was feeling utterly frustrated coming off this wild goose chase expedition to the ruins of Caister Abbey.
Which yielded nothing. She was lamenting the fact that so much money goes into excavating Greek cities, but no one seems to fund domestic archaeological spending in England.
But even when she's frustrated and distracted, she says her archaeological eye kept itself awake.
That's the mark of a true professional, isn't it? The lens is always scanning the landscape, filtering out the mundane to find the significant, and that eye spots something incredibly small.
A tiny square picture framed by ancient elm boughs, a doorway drawn distinctly in carved white stone.
And that was enough. She instantly tells her driver to turn, following this purely visual bait. And the house she found was a hall, built like the letter E, but with the middle section smoothed out. It was dignified yet humble. It was a perfect survivor.
And its survival is so critical to her analysis. She concludes it endured untouched for centuries for two reasons. First, it was too insignificant to be pulled down or rebuilt in a grander style.
And second, its owners were too poor to be ambitious. It survived through a long, quiet line of decent indifference.
This indifference extends right to the current occupants. She describes the descendants of the builder living there with a curious unconsciousness of its profound nature.
To them, it's just the house. They're so integrated into the structure that they are, as she puts it, as much part of the architecture as the chimney, blackened by 500 years of kitchen smoke.
And this unconsciousness, which sounds a little dismissive, is actually what Martyn calls truly healthy nature. She contrasts it with her own morbid, eccentric point of view, the person obsessed with the past.
She understands that these people are utterly unsentimental about a house they've lived in for 500 years because for them, time is continuous. It's just home.
Which leads to her great hope.
Yeah.
That these are exactly the kind of people who possess exquisite historical manuscripts and would sell them to the first rag man as easily as they sell pigwash or timber.
Their practical indifference is, ironically, the very thing that preserved the documents and now offers her a chance to find them.
So the initial encounter is just a masterclass in antiquarian deception. Martyn knows the first rule of the game. Don't state your real object.
You have to be oblique. She's let in by a contemplative maid, and she meets Mrs. Martyn.
Mrs. Martyn, or Betty. She's described as a rosy, sturdy woman of Martyn's own age. She looks like a housekeeper at first, but her manner instantly asserts her as the mistress of the hall.
And what's she doing? Operating a sewing machine on a pair of trousers.
It's a marvelous detail. A machine invented centuries after the house was built, grounding the domestic reality of the place right in the present moment.
So Meridew pretends to be a lover of the picturesque, seeking to rent the house. And Betty, speaking with this pleasant tinge of dialect, just cuts through the pretense immediately. Do you want to rent it?
When Rosamond pivots, hoping to rent rooms, Betty dismisses the idea decisively. We never let rooms. But she's polite, immediately offering to show the visitor around out of charity, genuinely unaware that the house is particular in any way.
As they tour, Meridew's sharp gaze catches the subtle signs of decay and financial struggle beneath the scrupulous cleanliness. The hall is bare, with a prominence of huge oak tables, but very few portable decorations.
Which suggests valuable items have been sold off over time. Betty's pride is chastened and clear-sighted. She acknowledges the rats, the holes in the roof, the terrible sink in land value.
And then we meet Mr. Martyn, John, and he doesn't look like the rough farmer you might expect.
No, he's middle-aged, dark-haired, with an unnatural pallor and a refined, well-shaped hand that smooths his drooping mustache.
He speaks with a strong Norfolk accent, asserting his identity, but there's this hint of suspicion in his hazel eyes when he looks at this strange woman.
And he seems utterly cynical about the hall. He immediately jokes to his wife that if she had her way, the old place would be left to the rats and ghosts.
He is profoundly indifferent to Rosamond's lavish praises of the house's antiquity. He just responds with these indifferent eyes and nose while munching on cold beef.
The conversation then turns to ancestry, when Rosamond notices the resemblance between John and a 17th century portrait hanging nearby.
And he identifies the man as Willoughby Martyn, born 1625, died 1685.
But when he talks about this ancestor, there's no grand pride. He recites Willoughby's history so curtly, almost like he's performing a necessary, boring task.
Fought at Marston Moor, royalist, exiled to Amsterdam, bought a bay horse, the breed they still keep, came back, married Sally Hampton, died of smallpox, buried nearby.
The knowledge is absolute, but he delivers it in this monotonous voice. The words rub smooth of meaning from long, tedious familiarity.
Rosamond observes John's humorous irritation at her fascination with his old fathers, and his reaction is crucial. He's annoyed that this outsider finds something remarkable in what he finds utterly normal.
His connection to the past is so mundane and continuous, it just lacks all the romantic charge Meridew is seeking. But that very persistence finally convinces him to show her the old things.
John Martyn acts as a very unusual curator. He guides Rosamond around the hall, using a riding crop to point out portraits in chronological order. He's essentially narrating the family's decline.
And Meridew notices it immediately. The artistic quality deteriorates, and the social standing decreases sharply.
The military coats of the earlier Martyns give way to these homely, snuff-colored farmer garments. The decline is narrated without any pride or regret. The later Martyns are simply farmers, or him who sold the Fen farm.
His tone is just flat, level, almost robotic, until they reach his father's portrait, a crude canvas that embodies this awkward transition between generations.
And just as Meridew is ready to leave, thinking the whole trip was a bust, John stops her with this half-comic, dogged persistence. Stop a moment, we're not done yet. There are the books.
He leads her into this small office, cluttered not with historical texts, but with ledgers, suggesting businesses transacted there. And these surprising decorations, taxidermied animals with lifeless paws and grinning.
And here it is, the treasure. John stoops and lifts a great parcel of yellow, unbound papers tied not with some ancient ribbon, but with a thick cord of green silk, like butcher's bills or old receipts.
He ruffles them carelessly like a deck of cards. That's no 11480 to 1500.
And Rosamond is just. She's utterly stunned. She gasps internally, knowing that the most valuable thing she has sought for years is right there, being handled like common waste paper.
She understands instantly that academic zeal or obvious enthusiasm is forbidden. It would look cheap compared to John Martyn's pure, genuine indifference. She manages to temper her reaction. Ah, indeed, that's very interesting. May I look?
She hastily reads the inscription while he's distracted. The journal of Mistress Joan Martyn, kept by her at Martyn's Hall in the county of Norfolk, the year of our Lord, 1480.
500 years old.
Yeah.
And entirely personal.
But John cuts off her moment of realization completely unceremoniously. My grandmother, Joan's diary. Queer old lady she must have been.
He confirms he has read it, but casually mentions he learnt a deal about the land from her. He provides her brief, sad history without any emotion. Born 1459, wrote the diary at 25, never married, died at 30, and is buried nearby.
And his indifference to this personal journal is just shocking, especially when you contrast it with his pride in the other documents.
Yes, He speaks of the Household Book of Jasper from 1583, detailing the precise costs of food and drink and servants with great pride. But his absolute passion, the item he holds most dear, is the Stud Book of Willoughby.
This is really fine stuff, this one. I wouldn't sell this for 20 pounds, he says. He just rolls the old horse names on his tongue, the pedigrees, the lives, the precise value of the bay mare.
For him, the practical, agricultural, and financial records hold the real intrinsic value. The personal diary, however, is just a curiosity.
He also unrolls the elaborate genealogical tree, repeating the names like a monotonous prayer. But Merridew realizes the profound difference between John's view of the documents and hers.
When Rosamond eventually asks about selling them, John looks genuinely perplexed, asking, "Part with them? What should I part with them for?"
He confirms their practical use in court, but then he offers the real reason, the emotional core. He would feel kind of lonely without his family around him. He needs his grandfathers and grandmothers and uncles and aunts for company in this lonely place.
And this changes the entire premise of historical research for Merridew. She was looking for something old, something separated by a gap of time. John Martyn, however, shows her that his ancestors, stretching back to the time of Edward IV, are still present.
They're not separated by time or romanticized history. They are all flesh and blood like I am, and the difference is merely the glass over the canvas.
That's a radical shift. After spending a lifetime chasing these fragments, why would she suddenly feel that buying them would be irrelevant and impertinent?
Because John Martyn already possesses them in the only way that matters, as a living connection. To buy them would be to assign a commercial value to his immediate kinship, to divorce the documents from their home and their meaning.
It's a moral epiphany for her.
It is. She realizes her original antiquarian zeal, the dating, the binding, is meaningless in the face of this immediate, cohesive, living history.
She realizes she can't buy their past. She can only borrow their story. So she requests to borrow the journal, claiming an interest in family histories.
And John, though it lowers his opinion of her intelligence, she chose the diary over the stud book, he politely assents. And so Miss Merridew walks off with Grandmother Joan wrapped in brown paper.
So now let's leave the researcher and step entirely into Joan Martyn's life in 1480.
We are now opening the pages of Joan Martyn, a woman writing in the late 15th century, documenting her life in Norfolk, leading up to her impending marriage, and you have to treat every detail as if we are seeing her world unfold right now.
Her journal starts in January, and the atmosphere is immediately established. The times are fundamentally unsafe. She notes that life is less safe and less happy, demanding that the family remain rigidly confined within their own lands, especially after dark.
And the nightly ritual her mother performs is just terrifyingly absolute. As soon as the light dims, the mother goes out with the great keys on her arm, crying out, "Is everybody within doors?"
Then she swings the keys one last time like bells over the road, clamps the lock, and bars the whole world away.
This confinement creates Joan's central, debilitating emotional conflict. On one hand, she feels this fierce impatience and desperate longing. When the mood is high, she feels the profound pressure of all England and the sea and the unknown lands beyond, rolling like sea waves against our iron gates, trying to break in.
She ran to her mother once, crying, "Let them in, we are starving!" A pure hunger for life, for adventure, for the world outside that iron confinement.
But that longing is instantly countered by sheer terror. On stormy nights, when the wind howls, she is profoundly, physically grateful that the stout gates hold fast against the nameless, dangerous threats. Bad men who prowl in the lanes and lie hidden in the woods.
Her existence is defined by this acute rhythm of safety and exposure.
After the gates are barred, strict economy kicks in. They can't afford tapers after 8 bells, which forces the family to gather tightly around the burning logs, and this creates a powerful focal point: the mother.
A woman more than 40, whose brow is marked by much thought and watching, and she rules them all. She sits in the great chair, winding wool, striking the iron rod to send sparks spurting, revealing her noble authority in the shifting tawny light.
The family configuration around her is fascinating. Sir John Sandys, the priest, is this querulous figure who acts as the mother's servant, and he's oddly happiest when she asks his advice and then promptly takes her own counsel instead.
Then there are the silent, long-serving fixtures. Old William, curved by planting, whose memory stretches back so far he's almost a human relic, and Anne, the nurse, the household expert, and of course the inevitable matchmaker.
And Joan, because she's the only one who can read, is given the responsibility of reading aloud from a manuscript her father sent from London, The Palace of Glass, which recounts the story of Helen and the siege of Troy.
This reading ritual is a moment of shared imagination. The family, though they're geographically ignorant of Troy, they see the story so vividly. They weep for the soldiers and picture the stately Helen as someone like the mother, a figure of strong authority and deep suffering.
And the priest, Sir John, he tries desperately to localize this distant epic, suggesting it must have happened in Cornwall where King Arthur lived.
But the shift back to 1480 is jarring. Once the light fails, the conversation turns immediately to contemporary plots, battles, and bloody deeds, the very real, local terror.
Jane Morrison carried off just last year robbings and burnings. Joan notes that the present isn't necessarily worse than Helen's day, but the absolute immediacy makes her and her little brother Jeremy tremble.
The nightly fear culminates in the cold climb up the stairs to her room. The windows are gray, the one broken pane is stuffed with straw, and the wind gusts lift the tapestry.
Bringing her imaginings of charging horses and men in armor to life. Her deepest prayer is terrifyingly simple and practical, that the gates hold fast and all robbers pass them by. Her existence is one of constant, acute vulnerability, protected only by thick wood and iron.
Joan finds her counterpoint to this winter terror in the dawn. She pulls aside the thick curtains to search for the sparkling, piercing ice of life breaking through. This is her moment of pure existential affirmation.
She yearns to taste the moment before it has spread itself over the rest of the world.
This desire to seize the moment, this gift of the present, is framed by a pity for her ancestors in the churchyard, whom she sees as perpetually tossing on old recurring waters. She is determined to defy that repetition.
And this desire for the immediate present is immediately juxtaposed with the harsh reality of travel in their world. We get a detailed, stressful account of the preparations for John Ash's journey to London, carrying the mother's important letter.
The courtyard scene before dawn is one of high tension. The travelers, cloaked and well-armed, gather while the stars are still visible. The mother, showing her noble concern, personally serves strong ale to each one from her own hand.
The horses are laden, ready for the journey, but crucially, they must still be ready for an immediate gallop if danger strikes.
The neighbors cluster around, giving their last messages and warnings, until the clock strikes 4, and the armed company wheels around sharply onto the road. And the road itself is the enemy here.
John Ash's journey is through vast, uninhabited lands.
Lands inhabited only by sanctuary men and wild beasts. We should probably pause there for a moment and define who these men are, because they are the personification of the danger Joan fears.
Right. They are murderers, robbers, or debtors who have fled to church protection.
That's the key. By taking sanctuary fleeing to hallowed ground, they often escape immediate justice, but the time limit for that protection is strict. Once it ends, they must agree to leave the realm forever, or exist outside the law entirely.
So the term sanctuary men here describes those who exist deliberately out of bounds. True outlaws, hidden in the day and let loose by the dark, always desperate for food and resources, they represent untamed, anarchic danger.
And the stages of the ride highlight this constant state of high alert. At sunset, silence descends, men grip their guns, and the horses prick their ears, needing no urging from the riders. They look fearfully into the shade of the fir trees.
Relief is only earned by prayer when they finally see the spark of their lodging far off on the rim of the land.
But despite this profound, ever-present terror, Joan expresses her adventurous longing. She thinks she would like to go that way just once, to pass over the land like a ship at sea.
She wants to defy the confinement and experience the vastness of the world outside her gates. She's a true explorer trapped in a world that demands security above all else.
And then the inevitable happens. Joan is summoned by her mother to her father's small chamber, the room reserved for the manor rolls and legal papers, confirming the seriousness of the situation. Joan curtsies, knowing instantly what's coming.
The mother is solemn. She explains that Joan must marry, a necessity that was delayed only by the chaotic state of the land. The proposal is clinical and strategic. Sir Amyas be God, Lord of Kerflings, whose land borders theirs.
So Joan would be their good neighbor. It's a stable political and economic alliance.
And we have to note the total lack of emotional connection here. Joan's knowledge of her intended husband is minimal. She has only seen him once, noted his fair, straight face and gray hair, and served him sack. That is the complete extent of their courtship.
Which perfectly frames the mother's cold, hard definition of marriage, which Joan records faithfully. It is a great honor and a great burden.
It means becoming the head of his household, yes. But far more importantly, the head of his race forever and ever. The destiny of the entire line rests on her ability to produce sons and manage the estate.
The mother completely dismisses the songwriter's view of love, passion, and a fire and a madness as something not to be found in real life. At least I think not often.
Wow, not exactly a ringing endorsement.
Not at all. This is a transaction of lineage and stability, not emotion or personal desire. The negotiation is entirely financial and political. The mother presents Sir Amyas's letter detailing the dowry and provisions, and Joan is given the paper to read to see if the exchange seems to you a fair one.
Which is an interesting power dynamic.
Right.
As the only daughter, her dowry is substantial, so she has some leverage.
Her immediate, unselfish thought is that she's willing to take less to stay near her mother and the land she loves. But the gravity of the contract immediately adds years to her age.
And Joan's reflection on her own identity is one of the most crucial passages in the diary. She realizes marriage is the only event that transforms a woman from a flitting shadow like and unconsidered in her father's house into a substantial body with weight which people must see and make way for.
She moves from being a non-entity to being an undeniable authority.
And the resulting burden of that authority is immense. She'll be mistress to many servants, mother of sons, ruler of his people, managing the herds, the crops, serving as chief lieutenant against enemies in his absence.
She has to perpetually maintain and renew the house linen and supplies so that her own daughter finds the cupboards better lined than she did. It's a constant material obligation.
And her legacy is also entirely material and spiritual. Upon her death, people will pass before her body for 3 days, praying and speaking good of her, ensuring eternal masses. Her worth is measured by her ability to maintain and expand the material and spiritual wealth of the family line through sheer hard work.
So, seeking escape from this heavy decision about her future, Joan runs with her little brother Jeremy and the dogs, internally crying that she wishes never to marry or grow old. She desires to remain cool and childlike among the rivers and trees, preserving her clear vision of the world.
They walk with Anthony, the chief steward. He's described as a crass man, not refined, but fiercely loyal. He once broke a man's head for insulting the mother. He is utterly wedded to this clump of earth, loving Norfolk more than any human creature.
He is the physical embodiment of the Martyn power on the land.
Their walk is violently interrupted. They encounter a strange man slouching along, dressed in rusty green, a sanctuary man prowling out of bounds for food.
This man is a known danger, a fugitive living outside the law. Anthony instantly grips Joan's hand firmly, underlining how close the constant threat is, even in daylight.
And then Anthony guides them toward the cottage of Beatrice and Peter Summers. And this feels like a deliberate, maybe even a brutal educational moment about the people they rule.
The scene is shocking in its poverty. It is literally described as a burrow of some rabbit, roofed with brush, with a floor of bare earth, and sticks burning so the smoke stings Joan's eyes.
That sensory detail, the stinging smoke, the bare earth, is a brutal contrast to the oak-shining hall. Beatrice sits on a rotten log nursing a baby, and she looks at them with unvarnished distrust and dislike.
She's utterly dehumanized by her environment, and Anthony treats her like an animal with strong claws and a wicked eye.
Peter, the husband, is equally reduced by this life. He merely touches his forehead. His only engagement with them is a fascination with Joan's colored cloak before he just stumbles into his burrow to lie down on dried bracken.
They are figures of filth, poverty, and raw hostility.
And this sight forces Anthony's brutal philosophy to the surface, justifying their family's existence. He explains that these are the people they must perpetually rule, tread underfoot, and scourge, or else the poor will tear us to pieces with their fangs.
It's a Hobbesian choice. Abs for control or complete chaos.
The walk is utterly spoiled. Joan returns to the hall and has this profound moment of realization about her own mother. She understands that the hard lines and the sternness on her mother's face didn't just come from balancing accounts or managing land tenure.
But they came from constantly seeing such sights, the ugliness, the distrust, and the inherent violence of the class structure they maintain. Her mother's sternness is a necessary defense against a threat that lives just beyond their clean walls.
As spring advances, Joan notes that the winter frost of life begins to melt. This is symbolized by the appearance of strange wayfarers, pilgrims, peddlers, gentlemen, suggesting the current of life outside their walls is beginning to chafe at their shores again. The air feels pregnant with new possibility.
And one bright morning, they see Master Richard. He's a man walking fast, talking to the air, with a great wallet and a stout book, shouting words in measure with his feet.
He's poorly dressed and patched, but he exudes courtesy and gaiety.
He introduces himself as Richard, a bookseller and singer from Cornwall, and he claims he values his book, The Tales of Arthur and the Round Table, more than a wife or children. He calls it meat and drink, horse and staff, and the best of all companions.
This is a man whose internal imaginative reality completely supersedes his material poverty.
Joan, desperate for diversion, urges her cautious mother to invite him in. The mother inspects him carefully from an upper window, but agrees, opening the gates to let their people in to hear the entertainment. It's a very unusual communal event.
Richard stands on a small mound of grass and begins the story of Sir Tristram and Lady Iseult. The transformation in him is immediate and profound. He drops his gay manner. As the story grows passionate, his voice rises, his eyes become fixed, and he seems to draw his words not from the book, but from a sight just beyond his gaze.
The immersion is total for the listeners. The air fills with the unseen presence of knights and ladies, murmuring, passing among them. The very poplars and beech trees seem to send gray figures with silver gems floating down the air. The reality of the hall, the gray wall, the people, it all vanishes completely.
This performance is history being swallowed by myth. When his voice stops, the illusion shatters. The figures withdraw, fading across the sky. The crowd, the wall, the man slowly swim back into focus, clear and cold.
Richard himself is momentarily lost, like a man who lets something slip from his clasp before he quickly recovers and sings a jolly tune about a nut-brown maid for the grinning crowd.
Joan finally gets to hold the beautiful manuscript. The capital letters are like little mirrors framing bright blue skies and golden robes, catching and staying those visions she saw passing in the air. When she asks Richard if he has seen such sights, he answers mysteriously, "They are to be seen by those who look."
And then he ties the covers shut, placing the yellow and gnarled volume, this powerful, undimmed fairy world, inside his coat. He refuses lodging, saying he must go on his way, leaving by dawn.
The family felt as though a strange bird had rested on our roof for a moment and flown on. The visit confirmed Joan's deep internal craving for the wildness of story over the stability of fact.
The year reaches its emotional and spiritual height at midsummer. Joan notes that the year is poised consciously on its topmost peak, and the family's prosperity and peace make a complete circle of satisfaction.
Her marriage to Sir Amyas is now settled for December 20th. She undertakes a major journey on foot, a pilgrimage to the shrine of Our Lady at Walsingham, to show a humble spirit, giving thanks and praying for more strength for her upcoming duties.
She realizes the physical act of walking is the best preparation for serious mental work.
She describes how the mind, which starts swift and merry, eventually settles down to sober work on serious things: age, poverty, sickness, death, and her own joys and sorrows. She gains this profound mental clarity.
She sees these feelings as solid globes of crystal, enclosing miniature worlds where tiny men and women labor beneath their own sky. It's a moment of objective, hard-won distance from her immediate life.
The approach to Walsingham is highly symbolic. She passes through a rich, soft, glowing fenland full of life, toward a stern summit where the light strikes upon something pale as bone. The destination is hard, sharp, and demanding.
She joins a great stream of other pilgrims, lame, blind, in rags, or riding horses, and they clasp hands, singing their miserere. She feels this desperate curiosity about their faces and stories, lamenting that flesh and fen should divide us, wishing she could know them intimately.
The journey itself forces a temporary breach of the strict class walls that confine her.
Then she sees the shrine. The harsh white figure of the image is stern, carved by sun and storm. Her endeavor to adore fills her mind with an image so large and white that no other thought had room there.
This is the moment of complete spiritual submission. She submits to the image as she has never submitted to man or woman, bruising her lips on the rough stone of the garment. When the ecstasy passes, the country beneath flies out like a sudden banner unfurled, giving her a sense of profound, hard-earned clarity about the duties she must undertake.
Autumn arrives, and Joan is prepared for duty. Though her courtship with Sir Amyas has been merely courteous, she admits no poet could sing of it. She still grieves that her lot is unlike the princesses she reads about, but her mother assures her that the truth of her responsibility is always finest.
And the mother prepares Joan by outlining her theory of ownership in these troubled post-war times. A married woman is the ruler of a small island that must be planted, cultivated, and fenced securely.
The explicit hope is that this small, firm spot of ground will one day be ready to form part of a new, stable world.
The mother has a specific, highly structured vision of the future England that Joan may live to see. It's a broad, safe road, with armed horsemen riding at ease, unarmed pilgrims walking cheerily, and loaded wagons passing one another. It's a vision of prosperous, orderly movement.
Her dream continues to include great houses with moats filled up, towers pulled down, and gates open to any passerby. There would be cheer for guest or servant at the same table as the Lord. The fields would brim with corn, and the poor would live in stone cottages.
It is a vision of solid, cultivated, stable, prosperous order, the total antithesis of the wild, hungry world just outside her gates.
And Joan honors this vision. She acknowledges it as good, but she struggles with it deeply. She finds the picture hard to look upon and fears she would find it hard to draw my breath upon those smooth, bright ways.
She doesn't want the perfect, controlled prosperity.
She confesses to this unarticulated craving, often halting in her walk, seeing a strange new look on the surface of the land, a new smile that half frightens you, and yet it beckons. She craves the unknown, the chaos, the story, the elements that make life dangerous but exciting.
In the final pages of the journal, her father, Giles Martyn, interrupts her writing. He's proud of her skill, but he laments that his ancestors, John and Pierce and Stephen, left no word left to say whether they were good men or bad. They only left records of their land.
So Giles Martyn dictates the line he wishes to leave, a final, concrete historical statement about himself, prioritizing physical reality and pride in his current state.
I am Giles Martyn. I am a middle-sized man, dark-skinned, hazel-eyed, with hair on my lip. I can read and write, but none too easy. I ride to London on as good a bay mare as is to be found in the county. He wants posterity to know him exactly as he is.
He believes his ancestors were much like him, plowing the same land, but he fears the future is radically uncertain. They may be washed off the face of the earth.
And Joan, despite her own fears, asserts they will live there always.
Giles then reveals the true, utilitarian reason for the diary when he asks to keep it as a token of Joan when she leaves, so their descendants may respect one of them.
And Joan admits that if not for this family pride, this sense of obligation to the future, her writing would have ceased long ago because there is nothing in the pale of my days that needs telling.
Her final intention for any future writing is so telling. It will not be of Norfolk, but of knights, ladies, and adventures in strange lands, as the clouds take the likeness of captains and soldiery. She wants to write the fiction she craves, not the fact she lives.
She concludes that even written books can't compare to the power of spoken storytelling, particularly the tales told by old women like Dame Elspeth Ask, whose stories came partly out of the clouds, making the air move and murmur, and who could even tell the future. The enduring power lies in the living, mutable story.
The very last scene sees Joan go with her father to the church to see her grandfather's newly finished tomb. She kneels to pray, but her favorite task is gazing at the stone figures of her ancestors. She pities them, and she wishes to give them a secret, an unthought of a kiss or a stroke, such as you give a living person.
Her ultimate secret desire is to reach across time and touch the past, to make them know their humanity was seen.
What a profound journey. We started with Miss Merridew, the dedicated antiquarian, 5 centuries later, seeking the real history of medieval legs, bodies, and brains, the physical reality of the past.
And she found precisely what she was looking for: the human cost of land tenure, the reality of vulnerability, and the profound emotional life of Joan Martyn, all captured in those secret, unthought-of moments Joan recorded.
And the paradox is just magnificent. Joan Martyn's deepest desire was to reach across time and connect with her ancestors, to give them a kiss or a stroke. Her father worried about being forgotten, about being washed off the face of the earth.
Yet their most private, self-doubting, and mundane thoughts, recorded in an unbound parcel of paper tied up like butcher's bills, were meticulously preserved because they were too insignificant to sell and too cherished by their descendants to throw away.
This brings us right back to John Martyn, 5 centuries later, claiming his ancestors are all flesh and blood like I am. The document's value, as Miss Merridew realized, is not the legal detail, but the humanity.
Joan's final wish was fulfilled by the very act of the diary surviving and being read by the woman who understands that history is ultimately about shared human experience.
The entire history of the Martyn family, from the 15th century to the present day, illustrates this continuous tension. We have seen the contrast between the mother's solid, orderly vision of England's future moats filled, gates open, corn everywhere, and Joan's internal, persistent craving for the beckoning smile of the unknown, the chaos, and the story told by the wandering peddler.
So we're left with this provocative thought. Which England did the Martyn family ultimately preserve through the centuries? Was it the mother's vision of solid fact, hard work, and orderly production that allowed the hall and the land records to survive?
Or was it Joan's internal yearning for the tale, the story, and the flitting shadow of the imagination that ensured her most intimate record, rather than the more pragmatic stud book or the tedious household accounts, became the most highly valued legacy of all.
It's a question of whether history is made of material facts or the captivating stories that survive and connect us across the centuries. Something for you to mull over as you encounter the historical fragments of your own day.